Hey, welcome back, Crime Think Tank family. Today, we're just going to get right into it because this is going to be a lengthy uh, program today. We're going to be talking about a tragic, just devastating case today. It's sad as well as it is very mysterious. This case is out of Alpharetta, Georgia, and it is going to be about a beautiful, intelligent, stylish, artistic young lady named Maury-Ange Faith Martinez. And on August 28, 2023, Maury called her mother and she asked her mother if she could come and pick her up. And so allegedly, her mother was just about 9 minutes away from her. And then Maury called her back and said that she was getting a ride. And it's from someone that, of course, the mother did not know of who that person was. And so several days later, no one heard from Maury. So at this time, the family went ahead and they filed a missing persons police report. They're in Alpharetta. And it's important to note that this is in Gwinnett County. Now, fast forward to January 2024, skeletal remains were found in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Here's another important point to kind of just keep in the back of your mind, that these skeletal remains were found near or beside a Volkswagen car plant. Now, fast forward 5 months later, the skeletal remains were finally identified. I believe it was in May, to be exact, and it was determined to be those of Maury Martinez. So you can imagine it's very, very devastating to this family to find out that their loved one was discovered unalive. Of course, they have some small level of consolation that she was found, but now they need to know, why was she found in this condition? And why was she in Chattanooga, Tennessee? And there are also other questions. So what we do here at Crime Think Tank, I want you all to get into the comments. We're gonna hit on several different things. Of course, we do speculative, investigative opinions, but understand that the facts always trump, our speculative opinions and thoughts concerning these stories and cases. We also want to determine, what lessons can we glean from this particular story, because it's also going to be mentioned that Maury, she had actually just been released from jail, and allegedly her mom thought that she was going to go into rehab. So that's going to play a really big part in this as the story is unpacked. And also, so we do not victim blame here. We are not biased. We do share the truth and the facts. And we also want to know, use our critical thinking skills to determine how we use this as a cautionary tale, directly or indirectly. And I want us to go ahead and list some tips that we can utilize, whether practical or whether there are apps that we can utilize that can help us stay, safe. Now, of course, everything is not foolproof. And we know that these apps and practical tips of wisdom, they have to be applied accordingly, okay, in these different events. And also, please like, comment, share, subscribe. And that's if you find any value in the content that we're sharing with you. Please hit the notification bell for updates on cases like this, as well as on cases that we've presented to you before, because I see that this case is going to have valleys, it's going to have mountains, it's going to have twists and turns. And also understand it looks like they have updated us on information about 3 suspects that have been arrested. I believe they have all 3 possibly been charged with hindering. They're not charged with murder, but as we're going to hear and understand that when they say hindering the death of a person, that can, of course, possibly mean that they were there, they were responsible for transporting the body, or, they were an accessory to this, to the death of this young lady. But it is important to know that the DA cannot move forward with charges of homicide because of the condition of the body, because they're still investigating, probably looking through phone information, GPS locations. They're probably viewing video surveillance from, throughout these 2 different states and cities, as well as, remember, it's jurisdictional. So you have the local police, you have the GBI, which is the federal agency in Georgia, and then you have the local police agencies in Tennessee, as well as the FBI is involved because it has crossed state lines. And so then you have to involve the FBI because of jurisdictional details that are involved in this. So let's go.
Tragically cut short.
Somebody who's just 20 years old, a beautiful young lady.
Nearly 1 year after she vanished, 3 people are arrested in this Georgia woman's death.
They're alleging these gentlemen were, and this lady were, they took her from somewhere in Cobb County and then drove her 2 hours. It's 2 hours period to get up to Chattanooga area, and then dumped her body up there. There's more to this story.
But still, there is no murder charge.
Meaning they know more, but they don't have enough yet to know what happened, but they wanted to make sure that they charged these 3 individuals. Like, we know something's going on here. We know you were involved with her death somehow.
And that's not the only puzzling aspect of the case.
We found the body in January, and then the mom gets told in May, what happened in those 5 months?
Here's everything we know so far about the case of Maury-Ange Faith Martinez and where Georgia defense attorneys expect the case to go from here.
There's a lot of murky things that I think ultimately more charges could ensue.
This case dates back to August 2023, when 20-year-old Maury was last seen. And from the jump, things are complicated. It was first reported that Maury was last seen northeast of Atlanta in Gwinnett County, being picked up from jail there. But later, investigators determined she was actually last spotted in Cobb County, northwest of Atlanta. These reports say she was last seen being picked up from a courthouse building. Then, months later, Maury's remains were found 2 hours away in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
It's multiple counties for sure, no matter what, because remember, she allegedly was last seen in Gwinnett County, leaving a jail. And then we have her then for real last seen in Cobb County. So that's already 2 counties. And then, yes, another state is involved. So it's multi-jurisdictional, period.
That's Georgia-based defense attorney Meg Strickler. She says the first part of the case that stood out to her was the timeline.
We found the body in January, and then the mom gets told in May, what happened in those 5 months? That's the part that we all know by watching TV, and crime scenes, CSI, whatever, that they probably ascertained something back in January. So how did it become so long to positively identify her in May? So that was the first thing that made me kind of go, eh.
The last time she was seen was almost a year ago in August of 2023. Then the remains are found in January, and it takes several months until she is positively identified, which you yourself just said, red flags there. So why might it have taken them so long to determine who the remains belong to?
I can guess. Again, I couldn't find anything out there on the internet to tell me otherwise, but maybe the remains were in such bad condition that they weren't able to, and it took a long time with what they were given. That's my only guess, and that probably is what happened. I don't know. I don't know. I do know that the Georgia Bureau of Investigations is backed up. It's very difficult to get anything done because they're just backed up, and so they do prioritize these kinds of cases. Period. But maybe it just took 5 months because of just the conditions of the remains and then bureaucracy, how long it takes to get things done here.
Law and Crime reported on the case for the first time back in May when Maury's remains were identified. For that story, we reached out to forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan. So the reason I wanted to talk to you specifically in this case is that the remains were found many months ago back in January, but were just now identified. Why would it take so long to identify who they belong to?
Well, we think about in terms of skeletal remains. Um, First off, if that's what we're dealing with, and it certainly sounds like that's the case here, they're going to be degraded to the point where there will not be any kind of recognizable features. And I'll give you, for instance,
I forgot to share with you all just a trigger warning. This particular video is going to be about 21 minutes and 43 seconds. So I do understand if you're not able to watch it in its entirety. I do encourage you to go back and watch it in its entirety, because it's going to be chock full of very good information that we can go ahead and dialogue about in the comments.
the old days of people walking into a morgue and pulling a sheet back and seeing the face, that those days are certainly gone at this point. We rely very heavily on science in order to get people identified, specifically DNA now more so than in the past, of course coupled still with dentistry. But you want to be sure, and that takes time. People want to speed this process up, but it takes time. So my thought is that with the medical examiner's office, they were in fact taking their time to make sure all of their bases are covered, because as sad as it is, there are more people out there missing than anyone can possibly even fathom, and you don't want to just jump to.
And just to add to that, I did a video recently on the missing and endangered. And he is absolutely right. When I looked at the statistics between all of the ethnicities, I mean, like the Caucasian ethnicity is like, I mean, hundreds and thousands of missing individuals, and then the Black, it's I mean, like 150,000, or more, and then the Hispanic is very like 120. It's very, very large amount of people that are missing in the Asian as well as the other ethnicities. It's not as large, but it really doesn't matter whether it's at a minimum or a maximum. It's absolutely devastating and mind-boggling to know how many people are missing.
Conclusion when it comes to ID. You have to be very, very careful. Wouldn't it be a tragedy if you misidentified someone and went and notified somebody's family and you didn't have 100% scientific surety with that?
After identifying Maury's remains, investigators came to a curious conclusion. Investigators are saying there's no signs of trauma or major injury, And I'm
Right.
wondering, is that because there has been so much decay, or there just weren't signs of it at all?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. The reality is this, is that once you're down to, our skeletal structure, when you think about, our framework, as it were, the skeleton, we can learn a lot from it: age, sex, race, these sorts of things. But when it comes to soft tissue trauma, if we think about things like, say, for instance, strangulation, we think about perhaps if someone was suffocated, or what if somebody overdosed? You're not going to have that sourcing information. It's gone. Uh, and you can have a fatal event that displays itself in the soft tissue, but yet there's not going to be any connectivity with the underlying bony structures. Say, for instance, if someone is in fact asphyxiated in some way, there's not going to be communication between the marks that we might, for instance, find on a neck, petechiae in the eyes. There's not going to be any kind of communication between that and the underlying skeletal structure. So it's not surprising that they would come to that conclusion over the course of my career, working with skeletal remains. Most of the time, the investigators, the medical examiner, even, you're kind of left scratching your head in the end.
So, will that make it more difficult to determine how she died and whether anyone was involved? If there is, in fact, a suspect, could that make things even more tricky?
Yes, yes. This this route is fraught with unpredictable outcomes here. Because if you cannot move forward, as tragic as this case is, if you cannot move forward with something substantive, the DA is that their hands are tied at this point in time. Because first off, what are you going to call this? The medical examiner, are they going to classify it as a homicide, or will it be the big U, as we refer to it, undetermined? And that frustrates a lot of people. But you can't just willy-nilly, just randomly say, oh yeah, well, this was in fact a homicide, because you don't have anything scientifically to hang your proverbial hat on. And it's very frustrating for families as well, because they want to know. And in this particular case, unless they can find something in the underlying bony structures, and I'll kind of tell you how forensics plays into this. One of the things with careful examination that would happen is that those scientists, forensic anthropologists, for instance, that examine bones, they're going to be looking for things like tool marks, perhaps some kind of evidence of gunfire injury. And one more interesting point to this is that if the body has been down this long, to the point where skeletonization has taken place, unfortunately, you might have missing elements of the skeleton, and that can come about just in the natural process of scavengers in the animal world that show up, and it's very, very frustrating.
Beyond just the condition of Maury's remains, there was still the question of why she disappeared under such unusual circumstances. Her mom was actually supposed to go and pick her up. She was about 9 minutes away, according
Yep.
to her phone. She's about to get her
Yep.
daughter, and her daughter texts her and says, "Hey, I'm getting a ride from someone else." After that, she doesn't hear from her daughter again. She says that this is really out of character. Is that situation a red flag to you, or do you think it could be unrelated to her disappearance at all?
We have to consider where mom was going to pick her up, right? Um, it's been kind of fuzzy, some of the reports that are coming out. But when you think about going to a criminal justice complex or to a courthouse area, this sort of thing, well, what's going on there? Who do it's not like you're going, to the local flower club meeting or something like this. All right. The chance that you're going to cross paths with someone that might not mean you well increases exponentially, I think, given this environment. Even if this poor young lady has no association with them, you never know who's coming in and out of a complex like this. And so, yeah, as an investigator, Oh boy, I'd look at this long and hard. I don't think that it's necessarily coincidence. Perhaps I don't believe in coincidences most of the time as a science guy. So that is an onion that the investigators will have to peel and consider. And with each contact that they make there, relative to anybody that may have been there at that particular time, they have to press. There should be CCTV that's available within this complex and without. How does she just kind of vanish at this point in time? People don't just simply vanish. There's generally some kind of catalyst behind this. So, yeah, as an investigator, I'd take a long, hard look at that particular geographic location.
All this is just the precursor to 3 arrests that came just this month. What do you hypothesize happened between when the remains were positively identified to when 3 people are charged?
I can only guess again, it's an indictment. So maybe once they decide, okay, we have some real information here, to get that from here over to the DA's office to then be indicted took 6, 7, 8 weeks.
I don't know if you all noticed in the flyer that we just saw, the missing flyer, it said missing and endangered. And as I reported in the last video that I did about this, it is important if your loved one is vulnerable in any way, mentally, emotionally, physically, you definitely want to share with the policing agency that they're not only missing, but they're endangered, because that causes them to move more quickly, more swiftly. They give it priority status.
Weeks. I think that's a normal time frame, and there was no rush in that 2 of them were already in jail with no bond on other charges.
Investigators now say Alan Carr, Sean DeShauser, and Jasmine Craig were all involved with concealing Maury's death. Carr and DeShauser were already in custody on drug charges, and Craig was arrested in Kansas earlier this month.
Yeah, they're charged with concealing the death of another or something like this. And what that means, and I have it written here somewhere, is that they had messed with the dead body and moved her. They're not charged with murder as of yet.
In fact, it's still unclear the cause or manner of Maury's death. Do we even know how she died yet? Could that factor in because her remains hadn't been discovered for so many months?
I'm going to guess again, but when I was sleuthing on the internet, which all of us do, you can tell that the 2 gentlemen that were arrested, they were charged with trafficking, and they were charged with trafficking fentanyl and a gun. And those things are public record in Cobb County, and it shows these 6, 7 charges, and they have no bond. That was in October of 2023. And he was charged with obstruction. I believe the Allen person was Alan Carr, which means he might have run away when they went and found him. So that was in October of 2023. That's so close to the last time we saw her, which was August, that I would extrapolate that there was an issue with drugs with her. Also, there was some interviews with the mother who had said that we had thought when she got released from Gwinnett jail, she was going to go into a rehab, and instead went elsewhere, which kind of puts 2 and 2 together again, that she may have just OD'd. But that does not help, because you can still be charged with a crime. If I gave you fentanyl and you died, I can be charged with that, with causing your death.
So for now, all 3 suspects are only charged with concealing a death.
It just says that they have hindered the discovery of the remains. I made sure to look up the details, because I was like, that's an interesting charge. Meaning they know more, but they don't have enough yet to know what happened. But they wanted to make sure that they charged these 3 individuals. Like, we know something's going on here. We know you were involved with her death somehow. And maybe they somehow know that they transported the body up to Chattanooga, and there's the hindering the discovery of her when she actually died.
That leads into my next question, because I know that Georgia is investigating because that was where she was last seen, but then her remains were found in Tennessee. So does that make things more complicated because we have multiple states involved?
Everybody's working together. I don't think it complicates things too much by having a neighboring state right across the border of Georgia, right into Chattanooga. I don't think that's going to complicate anything. I think technically how they got to be charged in Cobb County for messing with the body, maybe they know more.
But it's possible more charges could be on the way for one or all three defendants. What would it take for prosecutors to jump from the charges of concealing a death to murder or in some way being responsible for her death?
My guess is getting phones, doing the Celebrite reports on the phones. These things are such a treasure trove. 50, 100,000 pieces of paper are extrapolated from this, which is all the images, the text messages, your GPS coordinates. Those are the most damning. And so those things are probably reports that are still coming in from the GBI and from the FBI, because when you do mention the two different states, the FBI obviously can now be involved because we're talking about multi-state jurisdiction. All of that will give us the evidence we need, if there is indeed evidence to prove that they were involved in causing her death.
But with three defendants, there's also the question of everyone's involvement in Maury's death. One of the things that jumps out to me right away is that we have three suspects who are involved right now. And that is sticky because we have three different people with three different levels of involvement. How do investigators kind of siphon through that and decide, or determine rather, who did what?
Well, again, the technology is going to tell us. I think also, as you probably have seen in many a case, it's this, these people may turn on each other. Also, I did not look up the person that was arrested in Kansas, Jasmine Craig. I don't know what her storyline is. Maybe there's less culpability because she's from far away. I don't know. And maybe they're arresting her with these other two to kind of say you're guilt by association. And then she may be like, oh, I didn't do this. And then there might be some more information that she can give. And so when you're asking about levels of culpability, I think there's going to be some more of that, like I just said. But also the laws are such that if you're committing a felony and a death occurs, it's felony murder. So, there's a lot of murky things that I think ultimately more charges could ensue. Also, the charges, if they all remain in Cobb, could ultimately blend together. I'm not saying the drug trafficking and this one are related, but maybe they are. These are things that if it goes federal, will most definitely be all connected.
We talked about them potentially turning on one another, and that gets me thinking about the potential for plea deals. Is that something prosecutors might be looking into to get more information about one defendant over the other?
400%. That's kind of sadly how all drug cases go. And I choked on it because I can't stand it. I can't stand every single client I have charged with trafficking. The first question I have to ask is, the prosecutor would like you to come proffer. Do you want to go turn on somebody else? And I hate having that conversation. And so 100% that is something that's going to be asked. That's going to be something that's already been asked because it's already a couple of months old. And so we don't know who's already spoken, who's already cooperated, who's already given information. And I guarantee somebody in a drug case, it's always the case, somebody talks.
With developments in the investigation, Strickler theorizes that new charges could be on the way and explains what that could look like. And we've talked about the potential of future charges being filed, maybe even down the line, felony murder. So what does that mean in Georgia?
25 to life. You're going to go to prison for a long time. And I don't really love the felony murder doctrine that we have here in Georgia. It's not, and we criminal defense lawyers are working to fix this here in Georgia. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen here. I'm just saying that it's very possible. We have a death. We have drugs. We have, somehow hindering the discovery of these remains. That's kind of an already idea that's in the prosecutor's head. So there's more data that's going to occur. They just found the body in May of 2024. It's early to then quickly indict in July. So I do see a superseding indictment occurring. I think it's important to point out that somebody who's just 20 years old, a beautiful young lady, the fentanyl epidemic is dreadful. And I can tell you from experience that judges don't play. They will say, when they're looking at the case, they'll fiddle through their paperwork and they'll say, oh, this is fentanyl. And they'll be more harsh as a result. When they see that word fentanyl, they are always more strict on the punishments.
Even with a
And that's great that the judges are they sentence harsher because fentanyl is absolutely deadly. Just even, they say even touching it or it being in the room or you're in the vicinity of it and it gets in the air, it says it's that powerful. So, man, I really do hope that this baby was not exposed to that because they say it's just a horrendous way, to die. So man, this is it's very tragic all the way around.
Potential felony murder charge. Strickler's confident the longest sentence any defendant would face is life in prison. Does this sound like a death penalty case to you?
No, there's no circumstances, aggravated circumstances here that would warrant the death penalty. So I am pretty daggone sure there's no way it would come into this case.
What do you think, in your opinion, will happen, whether it will go to trial or it could end in a plea deal?
Well, as it stands today, my guess is they have some information that's technologically oriented that shows these individuals moving the body. It could be as simple as the cell phone coordinates, the GPS showing, the car, the GPS on the cars. Who knows? But I have a feeling it's technologically oriented and then corroborated by cameras. The cameras on the roads, the cameras on the Citgos, the cameras on the Quick Trips, whatever. And so I have a feeling that part is probably provable and therefore not triable. I think what's going to be a triable is if they try to add more harsh charges. That's when it becomes a case that would be a jury trial.
With many questions still left unanswered, Strickler says detectives are likely still working the case. But is it possible that investigators would be able to determine for sure her cause of death, or we could simply maybe never know?
Those are things that, that you see on TV, the crime scene, CSI, I love watching those shows. And, it does mean how she was found. Was she really just found in January? Was it earlier? We don't know. And the condition of the body and the forensics of what they can do, the coroner, are going to be pivotal on these cases. And then I also can say, if this were to go to trial, the defense always hires another coroner to then look at the medical examiner's reports and say, okay, you got some of the stuff wrong. So